But yes, let's talk about the game that we all watched today. Bayern against Leipzig. A lot tighter than the last two outings between the two. Unfortunately, and this is very timely, as Stefan, who couldn't join us today, wrote a piece about Bayern Munich's penalty history. And of course, this game is more or less decided by yet another penalty. Although I think there isn't much controversy about this particular penalty that Harry Kane then converted and pretty much, in my opinion, decided the match. But there was a situation in the first half where Leipzig had a legitimate penalty shout, Nusa being brought down. I thought, okay, well, he was brought down outside the box, but you guys watched this on German television, so you had Manuel Gräfe on as an expert at halftime, a former referee. And as I said to Sepp Staffelblur, now a secret gegenpressing chat, people named with the first name Manuel are never wrong. And he explained why this should have been a penalty. And it is just one of those things, right? Like, we just know that this is given on the other end. And I think that is really where, and I don't think, I'm not wearing a tinfoil hat, and I'm not thinking like that this is, the referees conspiring to giving Bayern Munich an advantage. This is typical for big teams. They get a home advantage at home, right? The referee does feel the 75,000 fans. I get all of that. But I don't know. It just seemed so very timely with Stefan's piece. What are you thinking, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, it's if you watch the game on Sunday, against Hoffenheim,
Yeah.
The fact that Luis Diaz, the penalty that really broke that game early on, it's really, really similar. In fact, in this case, you see the Bayern player moving in the path of Nusa, which you didn't see, in the example on Sunday where Kevin Apaguma was tussling with Diaz, and both of them, you could have been a penalty the other way around, or not a penalty, but a foul the other way around because they were really tussling with each other. But it's a classic thing that it was so early in the game. Sometimes, with the crowd, big teams, these kind of things. I didn't really like. I would have preferred that what happened tonight wasn't a penalty for Leipzig, because I don't like that kind of, it is all kind of above the torso level when you kind of moving at that level. I don't think it's such a big deal. But you got to be consistent. And even the second one that Bayern received on Sunday, I'd say was more similar to this one, where it was like kind of poor defense, but you don't really need to give a penalty for it. I think it's just when there's a lack of consistency, and particularly when there's a lack of consistency that goes in favor of big clubs, I think it really confirms what Stefan said this week, which was, Bayern are going to win everything anyway. They don't need the help from the referees. I think that was his headline. And I think just also from an observer's perspective, a neutral's perspective, there was so much to enjoy about the game today, enjoy about the game on Sunday, that you don't want to be talking about this stuff. It's just a bit of a shame, really. So yeah. Also, on the opening Leipzig goal after 4 minutes, it looked to me that the Bayern defender was trying to clear the ball, and he kicked it into the foot of Diamande, and then it spiraled into Baumgartner's direction. In which case, it's a deflection anyway. So that was a weird thing that I didn't think was brought up very much. And maybe they've seen better images than I have. I wasn't at the game, as I said, but that was another. The match could have a whole other complexion on it if that goal stands after 4 minutes. But anyway, in the end, it's the same thing that we said from Hoffenheim on the weekend, that it's hard to argue that Bayern were the better team today. And that's, they are incredible. They can bring on Musiala with 30 minutes to go, and they have so much quality. And it's the first time where they've had every player available. Nicholas Jackson wasn't invited today. He had to stay in the gym and watch it on the exercise bike because he wasn't included in the squad. And that's because they always have one spot too few at the moment, because everyone's fit, which is rare for a big team. But so they have the quality. In the end, the second half, they were dominant. But it's a shame when the referee decision is a talking point after the game.
Again, what do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think so many perspectives from ways to look at all these penalty decisions, aren't there? I agree with a lot of what both of you pointed out, and maybe disagree with with one slight bit, which I'll get onto. Personally, I don't think it was a pen. I think the contact was outside the box. So that's the
But
first thing.
Griefe mentioned that doesn't matter,
get onto
which is,
that, yeah.
and I'm confused about that one.
I'll have to look into that as well. I'll admit, when he was saying that at halftime, I was making a cup of tea. So I know, very, very, very English problems.
Well,
so I'll have to.
Before you continue,
I
had this argument on WhatsApp as well, right? And I said, like, I always thought the laws of the game said the initial contact counts, which I think was outside the box.
That was also my understanding, and is what I would, from my that was my objective understanding, and also my subjective view of where the contact happened. Obviously, he's not gone. It's not been VAR'd, has it? Because a penalty wasn't given, so there's going to be no VAR check on it. If it's the case that the foul is counted from where the contact begins, I think it's a completely legitimate and decision to make that this contact was outside the box. However, in that case, it should be a free kick. But then again, you can't VAR that either. But he's not given the free kick either, which was a really bizarre element to the decision, which I also can't explain, to be honest.
It was we can all agree it was a foul.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Although I do have a little bit of sympathy with Dan when he says that these that sort of contact in the upper body area. I do think it was a foul ultimately. But yeah, I do think Dan has a point when you say, do you really want, let's just say that it all took place a yard further forward and was quite clearly in the box. Do you really want that being given at that sort of speed? Yeah, and I think then you also get into the arguments of you're effectively threatening a punishment to, in this case, RB. For a foul, for an indiscretion which doesn't really merit such a punishment. But I suppose that's another issue as well. So yeah, no, I think in this case, on balance, just about correct. Apart from the fact that no free kick was given either, and like you said, Manu, I think obviously a lot less controversial than the penalty at the weekend, and similarly the penalty that was given. I also think a lot less controversial. I've seen some suggestions that is it Nusa that goes through? No, about who was it gets brought down
for the Leipzig situation?
Yeah,
it was Nusa.
It was Nusa.
Yeah.
Has he hung a leg out there? For the foul. No, has the Bayern player hung a leg out there and been caught?
But that was Stanisic.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not too sure about that. I tend to think that the goalkeeper, I think, has got his positioning wrong. He's got his timing wrong. When he comes out to deal with the initial long ball, and I think there's an element of him getting that wrong, which leads to him slipping and losing his footing a little bit, and then getting his tackle all wrong. So I think he finds himself a little bit in no man's land there. So for me, no particular issues with that either.
Yeah, I think you have to give that one. There's some reactions on that situation where Leipzig didn't get a penalty. The referee apparently had the instruction from the basement in Cologne that it wasn't a foul and that it was outside the box. And then apparently the referee told David Raum that if it had been outside the box, he would have given the foul, which he didn't. Ole Werner said after the game, when 4 people can't see that that's a foul, then maybe they're not on quarterfinal level. Which I
think on that one we're all in agreement that it is a foul. The only question is whether it's inside or out, and personally I think it was probably just out. But if Manuel Gräfer and the refereeing establishment have said now that the contact can continue into the box, which would be news to me, but I'll have to look into it. Then they'd have an argument to say that that's a penalty. But then again, if that was the case, it would have been VAR'd, surely, which I don't think it was.
Yeah, see, this is where I really lack the clarity from IFAB, because, again, I think initial contact is what the law says. Griefe, who is a former professional referee on this level, seems to have a different interpretation of the law. And so, but then, like, we know Manuel Gräfe does have controversial takes at times, so there's also that.
Yeah, he's not sure. This is probably a bit for a lot of listeners, like quite a bit of a German deep dive, but he's not shy of airing his grievances after a match, and he has standing because he's well known as a referee, and now he's working with some of the media over here, some of the tabloids and stuff. So perhaps there's a bit of an interest for him to be controversial, but I think by and large, I appreciate the involvement of someone like that because he'll explain things. He's really up to date with the rules. I think afterwards as happens in every single sport everywhere in the world, there's always this debate about the rules and who got it right, who got it wrong. We're being cheated, etc., etc. But he'll come out and describe what he saw and what he thinks of it. So ultimately, this is a case. I think the Sunday game, just to go back to that, where it was a red card. If in this case a red card was given to Stanisic for bringing down Nusa, then I think we'd have a whole other discussion on our hands, because that was basically the same thing that we saw, whether in or out. This is different camera angles showed that it was in or out. So ultimately, that's what David Raum said afterwards. I think he's have his quote here that he said, when you win in Munich, you need a bit of luck and you need a decision or two from the referee. Luck wasn't on our side. I think there was more in it for us today, is what he said. So the way that Leipzig opened the game, it could have been 2-0 and it would have been another story. Ultimately, the second half, Bayern, as they do in the second halves, their second halves have been phenomenal this year in the league and the cup. I think they're the first half table in the Bundesliga, they're 4 points behind Dortmund, but the second half is where they show their dynamism, their quality, and they did that again today. So yeah, I don't think anyone from Leipzig was complaining too much, even if Ole Werner said what he said.
Well, I think this was Leipzig's best performance of the three against Bayern Munich, without a doubt. And maybe it was, and I do think it was only one or two swings going the other way. Maybe we'll have a completely different discussion here. We might be discussing it should have been a penalty or not, right? I mean, like, in fairness, we probably would have the same discussion the other way, and I want to point that out here. I think what I didn't like, and I think this is what I really was impressed about Bayern Munich, that when they did go up 1-0, they quickly ended the game with that second goal, right? And it was an amazing pass by Michael Olise that found Luis Diaz there to beat Van der Voort, who, causing the penalty aside, I think was actually Leipzig's best player today. And I think that reaction was really good by Bayern Munich to just end it right there. My criticism on Leipzig's defense is there. I think that they slept. When they went down 1-0, they had like one of those blackouts, similar to what happened in the last match when they played Bayern Munich, where they were also very good until they completely fell apart. I saw parts or hints of that today again. They just don't seem to have the mental capacity to get lost, like not get lost in that moment. And I thought Willi Orban should have been more physical when Luis Diaz got away. Mind you, Diaz is one of the best wingers in the world, so it's hard to stop. But I think, if I would praise Bayern Munich today, I really liked how when they realized that they went up 1-0, that they had a very good moment here to end the game and did just that. And I think, Matt, that is just the quality that they have on their side.